Now let's talk about conditional launch settings. Conditional launch is another great example through the internet protection policy to ensure that that mobile device is in compliance, that that user is secure, and that overall security of the user is secure. And I'm going to give you a couple examples as part of this conditional launch. So when we think about conditional launch, the first thing that comes to your mind is, I want to validate that that user is still a proven user in my environment. How am I going to potentially do that? Well, to conditional launch, there's your ability to ensure that that account is activated. So if their account is disabled, I'm going to do two different type of actions. And these are the actions that are super important for us to remember. We have the ability to block access to that application, but we also have a more restrictive as part of the conditional launch, which is wipe the data of that application. So what we're effectively doing through conditional launch is we are enhancing the overall security of that mobile application by double checking that that device is in compliance, by double checking that that user is still valid, and by validating that other settings within that app are very important. One other conditional launch I think is super important for us to review. As part of the conditional launch, I have the ability to say, you're using the latest version of that application. And I'm going to go back to the Microsoft Outlook. So let's say that I leave for vacation, or I leave for a holiday, or maybe I'm in paternity leave, maternity leave, and so on, right? Maybe spend 30 days out. Through those 30 days, we have released and deployed many versions of the different Microsoft applications. But maybe not just the Microsoft applications. Maybe you have that LOB app that you have designed and integrated with the Internet SDK, and you have released a new version of that application. Through conditional launch, I'm going to say you need to use version X, where version X is the latest version. And if that person does not have the latest version of that application, I'm going to close that application and I'm going to block the access until they do that. And that's another great example of conditional launch. Another example of conditional launch, and this one is super interesting, whether that device is in compliance in terms of the root in the Android side or the jailbreak on the iOS side. I want to validate that the integrity of that mobile device has not been compromised. And if the integrity of that device has been compromised, I have two options: block the access or wipe the data, which, depending on the levels that I'm going to discuss in the data protection framework, you're going to take different decisions based on that. But again, these settings on the conditional launch is all about enhancing the overall security of those mobile applications, whether they are compliant or not, and you want to provide a flexibility to your end users to potentially address them. Not all the time you want to basically wipe the entire data, but a lot of the times maybe you want to block the access too. That person may have gone in maternity and paternity leave and you don't want them to access their email through that period. What this is going to do is, hey, your access has been blocked. On the other hand, you have a security exposure. Something has been compromised in that device. I want to wipe the data of that device through the conditional launch process. So I mentioned conditional access has been that first one level of validation through that identity and enforcing the required protection policy. I mentioned the second step to potentially revalidating that identity through the access requirement. And finally, the compliance through conditional launch, validating if they have the latest version of the app, validating if they have the latest version of the Internet SDK, and validating that the integrity of that device is still present by ensuring that they are not jailbreaked or rooted at that point. Through each of them, you're completing another step to ensure that the data is secure and protected.